The horse carried Nathan Jennings through the desolate canyon on a morning, so cold his breath hung in the air like ghosts of words unspoken. He had been riding for 3 days straight with nothing but his own failures keeping him company, and somewhere between the New Mexico border and this God-forsaken stretch of Arizona territory, he had stopped believing that God answered the prayers of men like him. The town of Victor emerged from the rust-colored landscape like a mirage, its weathered buildings clinging to existence in the harsh desert valley south of the Bradshaw Mountains. It was October of 1882, and Nathan had left behind a burned ranch, a failed mining venture, and the bitter realization that at 28 years old, he had nothing to show for his life but calluses and regret. The town sat quiet under the morning sun, most folks still sleeping off their Saturday night indulgences, and Nathan guided his mare toward what appeared to be a water trough near a small, whitewashed building with a simple cross above its door. He dismounted with the stiff movements of a man who had spent too many hours in the saddle, every muscle protesting as his boots hit the packed earth. The church looked newer than most of the buildings in Victor, probably built within the last year or two when someone decided this cluster of miners and drifters needed saving. Nathan had his doubts about that possibility, especially when it came to himself. The door stood slightly ajar, and through the gap came the sound that stopped him mid-reach toward his canteen. A voice, female and clear as creek water, speaking words that seemed to pull at something deep in his chest. He should have walked away, should have minded his own business, but instead he found his feet carrying him toward that door, his hand pushing it open just wide enough to slip inside. The interior smelled of fresh pine and candle wax. Morning light filtered through 2 small windows, illuminating dust motes that drifted lazy through the air. The pews were empty except for a single figure kneeling in the front row, her back to him, her dark hair falling in a braid down the center of her spine. She wore a simple brown dress, travel-worn and dusty, and her hands were clasped so tightly before her that Nathan could see the white of her knuckles even from the doorway. "I do not know if you are listening," she said, her voice carrying in the empty space, "but I have nowhere else to turn. I have lost everything that mattered. My father, my home, any sense of who I am supposed to be in this world. If you have any mercy, any plan for me at all, I am asking you to show me. Please. I cannot do this alone anymore." Nathan stood frozen, feeling like an intruder on something sacred and private. He should leave. He should back out quietly and pretend he never heard the raw desperation in her voice. But then she spoke again, and her words hit him like a physical blow. "I do not even know what I am asking for. Direction, maybe. Someone to tell me it gets better. Someone who understands what it feels like to be this lost." He knew he should announce himself, clear his throat, do something to make his presence known. Instead, he found his own voice, rough from disuse, speaking words he had not planned. "It does get better," he said, and watched her spine go rigid with shock. "At least, that is what I keep telling myself." She turned slowly, rising from her knees with careful dignity despite being caught in such a vulnerable moment. In the slanted morning light, Nathan got his first clear look at her face and felt something shift in his chest, like a key turning in a lock he had not known existed. She was beautiful, but not in the painted, perfumed way of saloon girls or the pristine manner of wealthy merchant daughters. Her beauty was honest and unadorned, with eyes the color of strong coffee and a mouth that looked like it knew how to smile even though it was not doing so now. She could not have been more than 22 or 23, young enough to still have hope in her eyes despite the sorrow there. "I apologize," she said, her voice steady despite the embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I thought I was alone." "You were," Nathan said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect his mother had drilled into him years ago. "I did not mean to intrude. I heard your voice and I should have walked away, but something made me stay." He paused, struggling with honesty. "I think maybe I needed to hear someone else say the things I have been thinking." She studied him with an intensity that made him want to shift his weight, but he held still under her gaze. Whatever she was looking for, she must have found something acceptable because some of the tension left her shoulders. "Are you lost too?" she asked simply. "Lost does not begin to cover it, madam." The admission came easier than he expected. "I am Nathan Jennings. I rode into Victor about 5 minutes ago with no plan, no prospects, and a strong suspicion that I am not worth the boots I am standing in." A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Theresa Palmer. And I arrived yesterday with much the same assessment of myself." "Well then," Nathan said, feeling the faintest stirring of something that might have been hope if he dared name it, "I suppose that makes us both either the worst judges of character or the most honest people in this town. Perhaps both." She moved down the aisle toward him, her steps measured and graceful. Up close he could see the exhaustion etched around her eyes, the fine layer of trail dust on her dress, and something else, something that looked like steel beneath the softness. "What brings a lost cowboy to Victor?" "Running," he admitted, then caught himself. "From what I am still figuring out. What brings you, the same, I suppose. Running from the past, though I have learned you cannot actually outrun it. It follows you like a shadow." She glanced back at the simple altar, the rough wooden cross. "My father was a preacher. He died 6 months ago. Fever took him in 3 days. The church in Santa Fe where we lived decided they did not need his unmarried daughter hanging around, taking up space and resources. That is a cruel thing to do to someone grieving." "The world is rarely kind to women alone," Theresa said matter-of-factly, though Nathan heard the hurt beneath her words. "I had a choice to make myself useful as someone's wife or find my own path. I chose the latter, though I am beginning to question the wisdom of that decision." Nathan understood more than she probably realized. A woman traveling alone in 1882 Arizona Territory faced dangers and judgments at every turn. The fact that she had made it to Victor intact spoke to either tremendous luck or tremendous strength, likely both. "I know we just met," he said carefully, "and you have no reason to trust me or my word, but I meant what I said. It does get better. I have to believe that or there is no point in continuing forward." Theresa's eyes searched his face, and he let her look, hiding nothing. Whatever she saw made her nod slowly. "Would you like to sit? I know it is strange, talking to a stranger in an empty church, but somehow it feels easier than facing another day of pretending to be strong." They settled into the front pew, maintaining a respectful distance between them. Outside, Victor was beginning to wake up, voices drifting through the walls as shopkeepers opened for business and miners prepared for another day in the nearby silver mines. Inside the church, the world felt smaller, safer, like they had carved out a space where honesty was possible. "I had a ranch," Nathan began, surprising himself with the urge to talk. "Small operation, barely profitable, but it was mine. Spent 5 years building it from nothing. Then last month fire swept through. Lost the barn, most of the stock, everything I had put into the land. No insurance, not enough savings to rebuild." He stared at his hands, scarred and calloused. "I could have stayed, could have tried to start over, but something in me just broke. I realized I had been working myself into the ground for a dream that might never come true, and I could not face another failure." "That does not sound like running," Theresa said quietly. "That sounds like survival." Her words settled something in him, validated a choice he had been second-guessing for weeks. "What about you? Where were you headed when you ended up in Victor?" Nowhere specific. I had some money saved, enough for a stagecoach ticket west. I thought maybe California, maybe Oregon, somewhere far from everything I knew. But the stage broke an axle outside of Victor yesterday, and while they work on repairs, I am staying at the boarding house. She twisted her hands in her lap. Part of me wonders if it was not an accident, if maybe I was meant to stop here. You believe in that? Things being meant to happen? My father did. He saw God's hand in everything, from sunrise to suffering. I always struggled with that idea, especially after watching him waste away from fever while I prayed for a miracle that never came. Her voice grew thick with emotion. But then I find myself in an empty church, pouring my heart out to a God I am not sure is listening, and a stranger walks in with exactly the words I needed to hear. What am I supposed to make of that? Nathan did not have an answer. He had stopped believing in divine intervention about the same time his ranch burned, had decided that the universe operated on chaos rather than design. But sitting here next to Theresa Palmer, feeling the strange pull between them like gravity, he found his certainty wavering. Maybe we are meant to make something of it, he said finally. Or maybe it is just two lost people finding each other at the right time. Does it matter which? I suppose not. She turned to look at him fully, and Nathan felt the impact of her gaze like a physical thing. What will you do now? Stay in Victor or keep moving? I have not decided. I have enough money for a few nights at the boarding house, time to figure out my next move. There are always jobs for men willing to work hard, even if they are not the jobs I want. He paused, then took a risk. What if we figured it out together? Theresa's eyebrows rose. You are suggesting we travel together. We only just met. I know how it sounds, but you said yourself the world is rarely kind to women alone. And I could use someone who understands what it is like to be starting over with nothing but hope and stubbornness. He held up a hand before she could protest. I am not suggesting anything improper. Separate rooms at the boarding house, complete respectability. Just two people looking out for each other while we find our footing. She was quiet for a long moment, weighing his offer against whatever reservations she had. Nathan waited, barely breathing, surprised by how much he wanted her to say yes. It was not just about having company on the road, though that was part of it. Something about Theresa called to him, made him feel less alone than he had in months. I will think about it, she said at last. Give me the day to consider. If you are staying at the boarding house, we can talk tonight at dinner. It was not a yes, but it was not a no either. Nathan stood, offering his hand to help her up. When her fingers touched his, he felt that same jolt of recognition, like his soul knew her even if his mind was still catching up. Until tonight then, he said, releasing her hand with reluctance. Until tonight. Nathan left the church feeling different than when he had entered, like some weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The sun was higher now, warming the October air, and Victor looked less desolate in the full light of day. It was a typical mining town, small but scrappy, with a main street lined with the essential businesses. General store, saloon, livery stable, a say office, and the boarding house he had spotted on his way in. He arranged for a room and a bath, spending longer than necessary scrubbing away the grime of the trail. The boarding house owner, a stern woman named Mrs. Chen who had come west from San Francisco, provided clean clothes for a small fee while his own were laundered. By the time Nathan made his way to the general store to replenish his supplies, he felt almost human again. The store was run by a weathered man in his 50s who introduced himself as Walter Sims. He had the friendly demeanor of someone who understood that good customer relations were essential in a small town. New to Victor? Walter asked as Nathan gathered provisions. Arrived this morning. trying to decide if I will stay or move on. Well, if you are looking for work, the Silver Bell mine is always hiring. Not the best pay, but it is steady. Or if you have ranch experience, the Thompson spread about 10 miles north needs hands. Lost a couple men to better prospects in Tucson last month. Nathan filed away the information, grateful for the options even if neither particularly excited him. He paid for his goods and was heading back to the boarding house when he spotted Theresa emerging from the dressmaker's shop across the street. She carried a small bundle wrapped in brown paper, and even from a distance he could see the determined set of her shoulders. She noticed him watching and crossed the street to meet him. "I see you found the general store. And a bath. Figured I should look presentable if I am trying to convince someone to take a chance on me." He gestured to her package. "Shopping. A new dress. The one I have been wearing for the past week needs serious mending, and I decided it was time to stop looking like I had been dragged behind a horse." She seemed lighter somehow, less burdened than she had been in the church. "I have been thinking about your offer." Nathan's heart picked up speed. "And I would like to hear more, not just about traveling together, but about what you want from life. What you are hoping to find when you stop running." She met his eyes steadily. "If we are going to do this, I need to know you are serious about finding a new direction, not just avoiding the old one." "That is fair. How about we talk over lunch?" There is a small restaurant next to the boarding house. Nothing fancy, but the food smells good. They settled into a corner table at what turned out to be more of a dining room than a proper restaurant, run by Mrs. Chen's husband. The menu was simple but well prepared. A mix of American and Chinese dishes that reflected the diverse population trying to make lives in the Arizona territory. Over plates of beef stew and fresh bread, Nathan found himself talking more openly than he had with anyone in years. He told Theresa about growing up in Texas, about his father who drank himself to death, and his mother who worked herself into an early grave trying to keep the family afloat. He talked about his decision to leave at 18, determined to make something of himself, and the years of hard labor that followed as he saved every penny toward his dream of owning land. "When I finally bought that ranch, I thought I had made it," he said, staring into his coffee. "Thought I had proved I was more than where I came from. But one disaster wiped it all away, and I realized how fragile everything was, how fragile I was." "You are not fragile," Theresa said firmly. "Fragile things shatter and cannot be put back together. You are still here, still moving forward, still capable of helping a stranger in a church. That is not fragility, that is resilience." Her words hit something deep in his chest, a truth he had been too close to see. "What about you? What do you want from life now that you are starting over?" Theresa was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. "I want to matter. For so long I was just the preacher's daughter, defined entirely by my father's role in the community. I loved him, but I never got to figure out who I was separate from him. And now that he is gone, I realize I have no idea what I want beyond a vague sense that there has to be more than what I have known. That is a start, though, knowing there is more to find. Maybe." She smiled, and it transformed her face, chasing away the shadows. "I also want stability. Not necessarily a traditional life with a traditional marriage, but somewhere I can put down roots, contribute to a community, build something lasting." "That sounds remarkably similar to what I want," Nathan said slowly. "Not the ranch exactly, but that feeling of belonging somewhere. Being part of something bigger than myself." They talked through lunch and into the afternoon, discovering unexpected commonalities. Both had lost their families young. Both valued hard work and honesty. Both carried deep wounds from feeling like they had failed somehow. But they also discovered differences that complemented rather than clashed. Theresa was thoughtful and deliberate where Nathan tended toward action. He had practical skills from years of ranch work, while she had education and a sharp mind for numbers, having managed her father's church finances for years. By the time they walked back toward the boarding house in the fading afternoon light, Nathan felt something he had not experienced in months: possibility. Not certainty, not confidence, but the sense that maybe, just maybe, things could work out after all. "I have made a decision," Theresa said as they paused outside the boarding house door. "I will stay in Victor for at least a few weeks. The stage company will not have another coach through for 10 days anyway, so I am stuck here regardless. In that time, I would like to see if we can help each other find those new directions we are both looking for." "Together?" Nathan asked, wanting to be clear. "Together," she confirmed. "As friends and partners, nothing assumed beyond mutual support. If after a few weeks we find we are better off going our separate ways, then we do so with no hard feelings. But if we find that we work well together—" She trailed off, leaving the possibility hanging between them. "Then we figure out what comes next," Nathan finished. He offered his hand and she shook it, her grip firm and sure. Partners then. Partners. That night, Nathan lay in his narrow boarding house bed and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of Victor settling in for the night. Somewhere down the hall, Theresa was doing the same, probably questioning her decision to trust a stranger, wondering if she had made a mistake. But Nathan did not think so. For the first time since his ranch burned, he felt like he was moving towards something rather than away from it. The next morning brought a crisp dawn and renewed purpose. Nathan met Theresa for breakfast in the boarding house dining room, and over eggs and coffee they made plans. First order of business was finding work, something to sustain them while they figured out their longer-term plans. Nathan took the lead on this, his pride still intact enough to want to provide. He visited the Silver Bell mine and spoke with the foreman, a gruff man named Henderson who looked him over with a critical eye. "You worked mines before?" Henderson asked. "No, sir, but I am a fast learner and no stranger to hard labor." "Can you follow instructions without questioning every decision?" "Yes, sir." Henderson considered, then nodded. "I will give you a trial period. 2 weeks, $3 a day. You prove yourself useful, we talk about permanent employment. You prove yourself trouble, you are gone. Clear, crystal clear. When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning, 5 sharp. Do not be late." Nathan accepted the terms and headed back to town, feeling the satisfaction of securing at least temporary stability. He found Theresa at the general store, deep in conversation with Walter Sims. "Nathan," she called when she spotted him. "Perfect timing. Mr. Sims was just telling me about his bookkeeping troubles." Walter looked somewhat embarrassed. "My wife usually handles the accounts, but she has been poorly lately and fallen behind. I mentioned needing help, and Miss Palmer here says she has experience with such things." "My father's church had a congregation of nearly 200 families," Theresa explained. "I managed all the financial records for 3 years. Tithes, expenses, charitable contributions, everything." "I could not pay much," Walter admitted. "Maybe $1 a day and only until my wife recovers." "I will take it," Theresa said immediately. "When can I start?" "Right now, if you are willing. The books are a disaster." They settled into a routine that felt natural despite its newness. Nathan rose before dawn each day to work at the mine, descending into the earth with men who measured their lives in the silver they pulled from the rock. It was hard, dangerous work, but it required enough focus that he could not dwell on his failures. His body remembered the rhythm of labor, and he found a grim satisfaction in physical exhaustion. Theresa spent her days at the general store, untangling Walter's accounts with patient efficiency. She had a gift for numbers that became apparent within the first few hours, finding errors and inefficiencies that had been costing Walter money for months. Within 3 days, she had reorganized his entire system, and Walter increased her pay to $1.50 without being asked. Evenings they spent together, taking dinner at the boarding house and then walking the perimeter of Victor as the sun set over the desert. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's stories, quirks, and dreams. Nathan discovered that Theresa had a dry sense of humor that caught him off guard and made him laugh. Theresa found that beneath Nathan's rough exterior lived a thoughtful man who noticed details and remembered small things she mentioned in passing. 2 weeks into their partnership, Henderson called Nathan into the mine office and offered him permanent employment at $4 a day. "You are a good worker, Jennings. Steady, reliable, do not complain. Those are rare qualities. Stay on and there will be room for advancement." Nathan accepted, feeling the relief of genuine stability. That evening he shared the news with Theresa over dinner. "That is wonderful," she said, and meant it. "You have earned it. What about you? How are the books coming? Finished, actually. I wrapped everything up today." "Walter's wife is recovering well, and she should be able to take over again next week." Theresa's expression shifted, became more serious. "Which means I need to decide what comes next. The stage comes through in 3 days." The thought of her leaving hit Nathan harder than he expected. Somewhere in the past 2 weeks, Theresa had become essential to his days. Not just because she was good company, though she was. Not just because she understood him in ways most people did not, though she did. But because she made him want to be better, do better, build something meaningful with his life. "What if you stayed?" he asked, the words tumbling out before he could second-guess them. "In Victor, I mean. We have both found work and the town is growing. There are opportunities here." "For you perhaps, but my work at the store is ending and I have no other prospects. I cannot live on my savings indefinitely." She looked down at her plate. "Besides, we agreed this was temporary. A few weeks to find our footing, then move on." "I know what we said. But that was before I realized how much better everything is with you here. These past 2 weeks, I have felt more like myself than I have in years, more focused, more hopeful, more alive." He reached across the table, stopping just short of taking her hand. "I am not saying this right. I am not asking for anything you are not ready to give. I just know that I do not want you to leave if there is any reason for you to stay." Theresa looked at him with those clear, honest eyes, and Nathan held his breath. "I do not want to leave either," she admitted quietly. "But I need more than want. I need a purpose, a way to contribute. I cannot just stay because a man asked me to, even a good man like you. I need my own reason." "Then let us find you one. Victor is small, but it is growing. There has to be something." They spent the next 2 days asking around, putting out feelers, looking for opportunities. The answer came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Chen. "I have been thinking," the boarding house owner said to Theresa as they settled the week's bill. "Victor needs a school teacher. We have maybe 15 children in town now and more families arriving every month. The children need education." "I am not a trained teacher," Theresa protested. "But you are educated, yes. You can read, write, do mathematics." "Yes, of course. My father made sure I had a thorough education." "Then you know more than most. The town council has been discussing hiring a teacher for months, but has not found anyone willing to come to such a small place. If someone was already here, already part of the community." Mrs. Chen let the implication hang. "You really think they would hire me?" "I think if you present yourself at the next council meeting and make your case, they would be foolish not to. Meeting is tomorrow night." Theresa attended the meeting with Nathan by her side for moral support. The council consisted of 5 men: the mine foreman Henderson, Walter Sims from the general store, the saloon owner, the livery operator, and a rancher from outside town. They listened as Theresa laid out her qualifications and her vision for a school. "My father was a preacher, but also a teacher," she explained. "He believed education was sacred, a way to lift people up regardless of their circumstances. I assisted him with Sunday school for years, teaching children from ages 5 to 15. I know I am young and I am a woman, but I am dedicated and I will work hard to give Victor's children the foundation they deserve." The men conferred quietly among themselves. Finally, Henderson spoke. "Miss Palmer, the town can pay $20 a month plus a room. School would be held in the church since we have no other suitable building. You would need to provide your own materials, at least initially. Are those terms acceptable?" Theresa's eyes shone. "More than acceptable, thank you." Walking back to the boarding house that night, Nathan felt the pieces of his life clicking into place in a way they never had before. He had work he could take pride in, a town he was beginning to care about, and beside him walked a woman who made him believe in possibilities he had given up on. "Thank you," Theresa said softly as they paused outside the boarding house. "For what? You earned that position yourself. For believing I had a reason to stay, for making me want to find one." She turned to face him fully, and in the lamplight spilling from the windows, she looked radiant. "These past 2 weeks have been unexpected. I came to Victor lost and desperate, and I found more than direction. I found a partner, I found hope, I found you." Nathan's heart hammered in his chest. "Theresa, I need to be honest with you about something. These feelings I have, they are more than partnership or friendship. I am falling for you, have been since that first morning in the church. I do not expect you to feel the same, and I will never pressure you, but I cannot keep pretending what I feel is simple or uncomplicated." "Good," she said and smiled. "Because I have been feeling the same way and wondering if I was alone in it. I know it is fast. I know we are still figuring out our own lives, but Nathan, when I look at you I see someone I want to build something with. Not just a life, but a future." He closed the distance between them slowly, giving her every chance to pull away. When she did not, when instead she tilted her face up toward his, he kissed her with all the tenderness and hope he possessed. It was a gentle kiss, full of promise and possibility, and when they pulled apart both were smiling. "So what now?" Nathan asked, his forehead resting against hers. "Now we take it day by day, build our lives here together and see where it leads." She pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "I am not going anywhere. Neither am I." The months that followed were the happiest of Nathan's life. He worked hard at the mine, earning Henderson's respect and a promotion to shift supervisor. The extra money meant he could start saving again, this time with a clear goal in mind. Theresa threw herself into teaching with the same dedication she brought to everything, transforming the church into a schoolhouse during the day. She taught reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography to 15 students who ranged in age from 6 to 14. The community embraced her, grateful to have someone willing to invest in their children's futures. Parents who had been skeptical about a young female teacher became her strongest advocates as their children came home excited about learning. She started a small lending library with books donated from families across Victor, and organized evening classes for adults who wanted to improve their reading skills. Nathan and Theresa courted properly, under the watchful eyes of the entire town. They attended church services together on Sundays, took walks along the creek that ran behind Victor during the cooler evening hours, and spent quiet moments on the boarding house porch, just enjoying each other's company. They talked about their pasts without shame, their hopes without reservation, and slowly built a foundation of trust and affection that felt unshakable. By February of 1883, Nathan knew with absolute certainty that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Theresa Palmer. He had saved enough to buy a modest piece of land on the edge of Victor and was making plans to build a small house there. But before he could move forward, he needed to ask her the most important question of his life. He chose a Sunday afternoon when the weather was mild, and the desert was in bloom from an unusually wet winter. They rode out to his land on horses borrowed from the livery, Theresa laughing as her mount tried to veer off toward interesting patches of vegetation. "This is beautiful, Nathan," she said as they stood on a small rise overlooking the property. "You can see the whole valley from here. I thought we could build the house right on this spot. Big windows facing east to catch the morning light, a porch where we could sit and watch the sunsets." He paused, then corrected himself. "Where I could sit, I mean. I'm getting ahead of myself." Theresa turned to look at him, understanding dawning in her eyes. "Are you asking me something, Nathan Jennings?" "I am trying to work up the courage." He took her hands in his, feeling the slight tremble in his fingers. "Theresa, 6 months ago I was a man with nothing. No home, no purpose, no hope for the future. Then I walked into a church and found a woman praying, and somehow I just knew that she was my answer too. You have been my answer to every question I was too afraid to ask. You have made me better, made me want to be better, given me a reason to build instead of just survive." "Nathan," she breathed, her eyes shining with tears. "Let me finish before I lose my nerve. I know I am not much of a catch. I am a miner with a rough past and an uncertain future. I cannot promise you riches or an easy life, but I can promise you loyalty, respect, partnership, and a love that will not quit no matter how hard things get. Theresa Palmer, will you marry me? Will you build this life with me, this house, this future?" "Yes," she said immediately, no hesitation. "Yes, Nathan, absolutely yes." He pulled her into his arms and kissed her thoroughly, pouring every ounce of love and gratitude into the embrace. When they finally broke apart, both were laughing and crying at the same time. "I do not even have a ring yet," he said ruefully. "I planned to order one from the catalog, but I could not wait another day to ask. I do not need a ring, I just need you." She cupped his face in her hands. "You said I was your answer, but Nathan, you were mine too. When I asked God for direction, for someone who understood, I never imagined he would answer so completely. You are everything I did not know I needed." They married 6 weeks later in the same church where they met, on a bright April morning with the entire town of Victor in attendance. Theresa wore a dress of pale blue that Mrs. Chen helped her sew, and Nathan wore a new suit that made him self-conscious until he saw the way Theresa looked at him. Walter Sims stood as his witness, and Mrs. Chen stood as hers. A circuit preacher passing through Victor performed the ceremony, his words about love and commitment resonating in the small space. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Nathan kissed Theresa with the reverence of a man who understood the value of what he held. The congregation erupted in applause, and they walked down the aisle together into a future that finally felt secure. The house took 3 months to build, with Nathan working on it every spare moment he had, and most of Victor's male population contributing labor on Sundays. It was modest but well built, with the big windows Nathan had promised, and a porch that wrapped around 2 sides. They moved in during July, and Nathan carried Theresa over the threshold to the sound of her delighted laughter. "It is perfect," she declared, looking around at the simple main room that served as kitchen and parlor. "It is ours." "It is ours," Nathan agreed, setting her down gently and pulling her close. "Every nail and board chosen with you in mind." They furnished the house slowly, piece by piece as money allowed. A bed from the general store, a table Nathan built himself, chairs and dishes accumulated from generous wedding gifts. Theresa added curtains she sewed and small touches that made the house a home. Wildflowers in jars, books on a shelf Nathan installed. Her father's Bible given place of honor on the mantel. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Nathan continued working at the mine while making improvements to their property on weekends. He built a chicken coop, and they acquired 6 hens, then added a small vegetable garden that Theresa tended. She continued teaching, beloved by her students and respected throughout Victor for her dedication and skill. Their evenings were spent on that porch, watching the sun paint the desert in shades of orange and purple, talking about their days and their dreams. Sometimes they would sit in comfortable silence, Nathan whittling while Theresa graded papers or mended clothing. It was a simple life, far from luxurious, but it was theirs and they had built it together. By October, a year after their first meeting, Theresa had news that filled them both with joy and terror in equal measure. "I am pregnant," she told Nathan one evening, taking his hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "The baby should come in late spring." Nathan felt his eyes fill with tears. "Are you sure?" "As sure as I can be. I have missed 2 courses and I have been sick every morning for a week." She smiled at him, radiant despite her nervousness. "We are going to have a baby, Nathan. You are going to be a father." He kissed her tenderly, overcome with emotion. "You are going to be an amazing mother. This child, they are so lucky to have you." "To have us both," she corrected. "We are in this together, remember." The pregnancy progressed well despite Theresa's morning sickness that lasted well into her 2nd trimester. She continued teaching until March, when the physical demands became too much, and one of the older students took over temporarily. The women of Victor rallied around her, offering advice and support and hand-me-down baby items. Nathan became even more protective, fretting over every twinge and pain Theresa experienced. She tolerated his hovering with good humor, occasionally reminding him that women had been having babies since the dawn of time. "I know," he would say, "but this is you. This is our baby. I am allowed to worry." On a warm night in May of 1884, Theresa woke Nathan with a hand on his shoulder and calm words that sent his heart racing. "It is time. The baby is coming." The next 12 hours were the longest of Nathan's life. He paced the porch while Mrs. Chen and 2 other experienced women attended Theresa in their bedroom. He could hear her occasional cries of pain and it tore at him, made him feel helpless and useless. Walter Sims and Henderson came to sit with him, offering whiskey and distraction, but nothing could calm his nerves. Finally, just as the sun reached its zenith, the thin wail of a newborn pierced the air. Nathan was on his feet instantly, but Mrs. Chen emerged and blocked his path. "Everyone is fine," she said, smiling. "You have a son, Mr. Jennings, a healthy, strong boy." She let him pass, and Nathan entered the bedroom with his heart in his throat. Theresa lay propped against the pillows, exhausted but glowing, cradling a tiny bundle wrapped in soft blankets. She looked up as he approached, her eyes full of love and pride. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Nathan sat carefully on the edge of the bed and looked down at the tiny face peering out from the blankets. His son. He had a son. The reality of it crashed over him, and he felt tears streaming down his face unchecked. "He is perfect," Nathan whispered, reaching out to touch one impossibly small hand. The baby's fingers closed around his thumb with surprising strength. "He is absolutely perfect. We should name him," Theresa said. "I was thinking, if you agree, we could call him James, after my father." "James," Nathan tested the name, then nodded. "James Jennings. I like it. I like it very much." They spent the next few days in an exhausted, joyful haze, learning how to care for their infant son. James was a good baby, healthy and hungry, with a powerful set of lungs when he wanted attention. Nathan discovered that he loved being a father, even the difficult parts. Changing diapers, walking a fussy baby at 3 in the morning, the constant worry that they were somehow doing everything wrong. All of it felt meaningful in a way his work never quite had. Theresa took to motherhood with the same dedication she brought to teaching, though Nathan could see the exhaustion wearing on her. He took on more of the household duties, cooking simple meals and keeping the house in order while Theresa recovered and adjusted to the demands of a newborn. By the time James was 3 months old, they had found their rhythm as a family. Theresa resumed teaching part-time, bringing James with her to the schoolhouse where the students took turns helping care for him. It became a learning opportunity, the older students practicing responsibility and gentleness, while the younger ones delighted in having a baby to coo over. Life continued, marked by small joys and occasional challenges. Nathan received another promotion at the mine, this time to assistant foreman with a substantial raise in pay. They were able to hire someone to help with the heavier household work and make improvements to the property, adding a proper barn and acquiring 2 cows for milk. James grew into a curious, energetic toddler who kept them constantly busy. By the time he was 2, Theresa was pregnant again, and in the spring of 1886 they welcomed a daughter they named Grace. She had her mother's dark hair and her father's blue eyes, and both parents fell instantly in love. The years passed in a blur of work, child rearing, and community involvement. Nathan and Theresa became pillars of Victor, respected for their work ethic and their genuine care for their neighbors. They helped new families get established, supported the church and school, and participated in the slow but steady growth of their town. When James was 7 and Grace was 5, Nathan received an unexpected offer. Henderson was retiring as foreman of the Silver Bell mine, and the company wanted Nathan to take over. It meant better pay, more responsibility, and a level of stability Nathan had never imagined achieving. "What do you think?" he asked Theresa that evening after the children were asleep. "I think you have earned it 10 times over. You have worked hard and proven yourself capable. This is your reward." She smiled at him across the table. "And I think it is perfect timing. The mine company is offering to build us a bigger house. The children are growing and we need more space." "A bigger house sounds good," Nathan admitted, "but I want to keep this one too. Maybe rent it out to a family in need or save it for James when he is grown." "Always thinking ahead," Theresa said fondly. "That is one of the many things I love about you." They moved into the new house in 1888, a larger structure with 4 bedrooms and modern amenities that made Theresa's daily work much easier. It sat on the same piece of land as their first house, which they did indeed keep, eventually housing a young miner and his new bride. James started school with his mother as his teacher, a situation that amused the other students. Grace followed 2 years later, both children bright and curious. Nathan would sit on the new porch in the evenings and watch them play in the yard, amazed at the life he and Theresa had built. By 1890, Victor had grown from a scrappy mining town into a proper community with over 300 residents. The town finally built a dedicated schoolhouse, and Theresa was asked to serve as the principal in addition to teaching. She accepted, taking pride in shaping not just individual students but the educational foundation of the entire town. Nathan had settled completely into his role as mine foreman, respected by his workers and trusted by the company. He had even started investing in mining claims on the side, a calculated risk that paid off when one of his claims yielded a modest but consistent silver vein. The extra income meant they could afford luxuries they had never imagined. books ordered from back east, musical instruments for the children, the occasional trip to Prescott for supplies and entertainment. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1893, Nathan arranged for Mrs. Chen to watch the children overnight and took Theresa to Prescott for a proper celebration. They stayed in a hotel, ate at a fancy restaurant, and walked through the town like young lovers with all the time in the world. "Can you believe it has been 10 years?" Theresa asked as they stood on the hotel balcony overlooking the city lights. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday. Other times it feels like I have known you my entire life." Nathan pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. "And I still look at you and feel the same way I did that morning in the church, like you are the answer to every question I was afraid to ask. We have built something beautiful, have we not?" She leaned into his embrace. "Not just a marriage, but a life. A family, a home, a place in the world. Sometimes I think about that desperate woman praying in an empty church, and I barely recognize her. I think about that lost cowboy too. How close he came to riding right past Victor, past you, past all of this." Nathan turned her to face him. "I used to wonder if God was listening when I prayed. Then I met you and I stopped wondering. I know he was listening, because he led me exactly where I needed to be." They kissed under the stars, two people who had found each other when they needed it most and had built something lasting from broken pieces. The years continued to roll forward. James grew into a thoughtful young man interested in geology and mining, often accompanying his father to work and asking endless questions. Grace developed a talent for music and teaching, already showing signs of following in her mother's footsteps. In 1895, Theresa surprised them all with a third pregnancy at 35 years old. "We are getting too old for this," Nathan joked when she told him, though his eyes shone with happiness. "Speak for yourself," Theresa retorted. "I feel perfectly capable of managing one more child." Their second daughter, Rose, arrived that fall, completing their family. She had red gold hair like Nathan's mother, a genetic surprise that delighted everyone. James and Grace took to being older siblings with enthusiasm, both helping care for the baby and entertaining her as she grew. The turn of the century found the Jennings family well established and happy. James, at 17, was preparing to attend mining school in California. Grace, at 14, was already helping teach the younger students under her mother's supervision. Rose, at 5, was the darling of Victor, charming everyone with her bright personality and quick wit. Nathan, at 46, had weathered into a solid, dependable man with silver threads in his hair and laugh lines around his eyes. He had achieved a level of success that would have seemed impossible to that desperate cowboy who rode into Victor in 1882. But he knew the wealth that mattered most was not measured in money or property. Theresa, at 41, had grown into her role as educator and community leader with grace and strength. Her school had produced dozens of successful students, some going on to universities back east, others staying in Victor to build lives and families of their own. She had never lost her faith, though it had evolved from the rigid structure of her father's religion into something more personal and expansive. One evening in the summer of 1901, after the children were in bed, Nathan and Theresa sat on their porch as they had done thousands of times before. But this time, Nathan pulled out a worn piece of paper he had kept hidden for years. "I want to show you something," he said, unfolding it carefully. "What is it?" "A list I made the night before I rode into Victor. I was camped out in the canyon, feeling sorry for myself, and I decided to write down everything I had lost. The ranch, my savings, my pride, my faith, my hope for the future. I made this list of all the reasons I had failed." Theresa took the paper, scanning the faded words. "Nathan, why did you keep this?" "Because I wanted to remember, not to punish myself, but to never forget where I came from, what I felt like when I thought I had nothing left to lose." He took her hand. "And I want to write a new list. Everything I gained. Starting from that morning I walked into the church." He pulled out a fresh piece of paper and began writing as Theresa watched over his shoulder. "A partner who challenges and supports me. A wife I love more each day. 3 healthy, wonderful children. A home we built together. Work that gives me purpose. A community that respects us. Faith restored not through easy answers but through lived experience. The knowledge that failure is not final and success is not guaranteed, but love and dedication can build something that lasts." "The best thing on this list," Nathan said, setting down the pen, "is knowing that we found each other when we were both at our lowest. We could have given up, could have let our pain and fear keep us isolated. Instead, we took a chance on each other and built all of this." Theresa wiped tears from her eyes. "I am so grateful I walked into that church, that I prayed out loud, that you were brave enough to stay when you should have left." "I think we were meant to find each other," Nathan said. "Call it God, call it fate, call it luck. I do not care what name you give it. I just know that you were my answer and I hope I was yours." "You were," Theresa assured him. "You are, every day." They sat together in the gathering dusk, hands linked, watching the desert sky turn from gold to purple to deep blue. Around them, Victor hummed with life. Lamps flickered on in windows, children played last games before being called inside, neighbors called greetings to each other across fences. It was ordinary and beautiful, this life they had built. The years continued to pass, each bringing new joys and challenges. James returned from mining school with a degree and fresh ideas for improving operations at the Silver Bell. He eventually took over as foreman when Nathan retired at 55, carrying on the family legacy. Grace opened her own school in a neighboring town, taking her mother's teachings and expanding on them. Rose, surprising everyone, developed an interest in medicine and left for nursing school in San Francisco. Nathan and Theresa entered their retirement years with grace, finally having time to travel and pursue hobbies they had put off during the busy years of raising children and building careers. They took a trip to Texas so Nathan could visit his family's old homestead, and another to Santa Fe so Theresa could see her father's church once more. Both journeys were bittersweet, filled with memories of who they had been before they found each other. But always, they returned to Victor, to the home they had built, to the life they had chosen. The town continued to grow and change around them, but their piece of it remained constant. Their house became a gathering place for children and grandchildren, for friends and neighbors, for anyone who needed a welcoming space and a listening ear. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1913, the town of Victor threw a celebration in their honor. Nearly the entire community turned out, spanning 3 generations of people whose lives Nathan and Theresa had touched. There were speeches and gifts, music and dancing, an outpouring of love that left both of them overwhelmed. Mr. and Mrs. Jennings, the current mayor said in his toast, represent the best of what our community can be. They came to Victor with nothing but hope and determination, and they built not just a life for themselves but helped build a town for all of us. Their dedication to each other, to their family, and to Victor has been an inspiration to everyone fortunate enough to know them. We are better for having them among us. Later that night, alone in their bedroom, Theresa turned to Nathan with wonder in her eyes. "Did you ever imagine this? All those years ago when we were just 2 lost people in an empty church?" "Never," Nathan admitted. "I could not have dreamed this big, could not have imagined being this happy, this fulfilled, this surrounded by love." He pulled her close, marveling at how well they still fit together after 3 decades. You know what the best part is? What? Knowing we have more years ahead. More time to spend together, to watch our grandchildren grow, to keep building this life we started. And they did have more years, good years filled with the comfortable intimacy of long partnership. They watched James marry and have 4 children of his own. Grace's school flourished, educating hundreds of students across 2 decades. Rose became a respected nurse in San Francisco, eventually returning to Arizona to provide medical care in rural areas that desperately needed it. Nathan and Theresa grew old together with grace and humor, their love deepening rather than diminishing with time. They walked slower, laughed easier, held each other closer. Every morning Nathan would wake up and look at Theresa beside him and feel the same gratitude he had felt that first day in the church. Every evening Theresa would take Nathan's hand and thank God for leading her to exactly the right place at exactly the right time. In the spring of 1925, Nathan fell ill with pneumonia. At 71, his body could not fight the infection the way it once might have. He spent his final weeks in the bed they had shared for over 40 years, surrounded by family, holding Theresa's hand as his strength slowly ebbed. "I am not afraid," he told her one evening when they were alone. "I have lived a full life, loved you completely, and left something good behind. A man cannot ask for more than that." "I am not ready to say goodbye," Theresa whispered, tears streaming down her face. "You will never have to. I will always be with you in this house we built, in our children and grandchildren, in every corner of Victor that we helped shape." He touched her face gently. "You were my answer, Theresa. From that first moment until this last one, you were always my answer." Nathan Jennings passed peacefully 3 days later, with Theresa beside him and his children gathered close. The town of Victor mourned the loss of one of its founding pillars, and the funeral drew people from across the territory. He was laid to rest in the Victor Cemetery under a simple headstone that read, "Beloved husband, father, friend. He built a life worth living." Theresa lived another 8 years, remaining active in the community despite her grief. She found comfort in her children and grandchildren, in her work at the school that still bore her name, in the knowledge that what she and Nathan had built together would last far beyond their lifetimes. She passed quietly in her sleep in 1933 at the age of 73 and was buried beside Nathan under a matching headstone. Beloved wife, mother, teacher. She built a life worth living. Their legacy lived on in Victor and beyond. The Jennings children carried forward the values their parents had instilled: hard work, dedication to community, unwavering love for family. The grandchildren grew up hearing stories of the cowboy and the preacher's daughter who met in an empty church and built something beautiful from their brokenness. The church where they first met still stood in Victor, now a historical landmark. A plaque inside told their story, how 2 lost souls had found each other, and, in finding each other, had found themselves. It became a popular spot for couples to visit, drawn by the romantic notion that the right person could change everything. Because that was the truth Nathan and Theresa had lived. When 2 people find each other at exactly the right moment, when they choose each other every day, when they build rather than simply exist, they create something that transcends their individual lives. They become part of something larger, a story that continues long after they are gone. And in Victor, Arizona, that story was told and retold, generation after generation, a testament to the power of love, faith, and 2 people who were brave enough to take a chance on each other when they had every reason to give up. They had been each other's answer, and in answering each other, they had built a life that mattered, a love that lasted, and a legacy that would never be forgotten.